Hi, this is Julie Harland, and I'm your Math Gal. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com where you could search for any of my videos organized by topic. On this video, we're going to be multiplying and dividing fractions, but some of the fractions will be negative. So we do the following 7 problems on this video. So here's the first problem. We have one fraction times another fraction. But first, let's deal with whether the answer is going to be positive or negative. We have a negative times a positive. So that means our answer is going to be negative. So we know our final answer is going to be negative. So we don't worry about the positive or negatives anymore. And now we simply multiply. Now you can multiply out and then reduce, but of course it's easy to cancel. And hopefully you see 5 goes into 10. So let's do that. Dividing each by 5. 5 divided by 5 and 10 divided by 5. We then have left in the numerator, ignore the signs, we already know the final answer is negative, 2 times 2, so that's the new numerator, and the denominator is 1 times 11, and that's our answer. So we're just putting the two concepts together, how to multiply fractions, and then determining whether the answer is positive or negative. All right, here's our next problem. We have negative 3/8 times negative 4. Is this going to be a positive or a negative answer? Well, negative times negative is positive, so we know it's positive, so I know all we have to do is multiply 3/8 times 4. All right, so we know the answer is positive. We don't need to write a positive sign. And how do we do 3/8 times 4? Well, it's probably easier to write this as 3/8 times 4 over 1 to see if you can cancel anything. And let's see. You can divide top and bottom by 4 here, right? Divided by 4 is 1. Divided by 8 by 4 is 2. And I understand that you could also do this by prime factorization and canceling, but most people like to do it this way. So what do we have left in the numerator? 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. Now remember, if in the denominator everything canceled, you would have a whole number because anything divided by 1. And in the numerator, if everything canceled, you would still have a 1 in the numerator. So just remember those facts about multiplying by fractions. Here's our next problem. So again, we're multiplying fractions, but we have a mixed number times a fraction. Okay, so we're going to have to deal with this mixed number. And we also have a positive times a negative number. So will this answer be positive or negative? Positive times negative is negative. Right now, in order to multiply it with mixed numbers, remember we want to change that to an improper fraction. So the denominator would still be 2, and then we do 2 times 2 is 4, plus the 1 is 5 halves. So 2.5 could be written as 5 halves, and then the 3/10. Now notice I just put the minus sign out in front because I already took care of the multiplication. If you wanted, you could have not done that first and just written negative 3/10. In any case, you're still going to end up with just one negative sign when all is said and done. That's up to you. So when you're done, there's still going to be that minus sign out here. Right now, does anything cancel here? Well, let's see. The 5 and the 10 again, I can cancel. And so in the numerator, I have 1 times 3. Again, I'm not concerning myself with a negative because I've already written the minus sign out in front. Times 2 is 4. This is negative 3/4. Now, I want to point out something important. What if this problem had been negative 2.5 times positive 3/10? As it turns out, the answer is exactly the same because you're still doing a negative times a positive, right? And you're still doing 2.5 times 3/10. What I want you to do is make sure you realize how you change a negative mixed number. The minus sign just still stays out in front, and you still do 2 times 2 plus 1, negative 5 halves. So that is how to write a negative mixed number. This is a common mistake that you want to avoid. some people think of this as 2 times negative 2, which would be negative 4, and then they add 1 and get a negative 3. But that's wrong, not true. So don't do 2 times negative 2 and plus 1 for the numerator. All right, so over here is the correct way to do it. We rewrite negative 2 1/2 as negative 5/2, multiply it by 3/10. And when we cancel, we still are going to end up with negative 3/4. All right, so when you have a negative number that's a mixed number, you could think of that as negative 1 times 2 1/2. So you change the mixed number, ignoring the negative sign. All right, let's do the next problem. Now we have a division problem. All right, so let's decide if the answer is going to be positive or negative. We have a negative divided by a negative, so our answer is going to be positive, so I don't need to write anything down. But with division, remember you have to multiply by the reciprocal. Remember when you have a negative times a negative, if you want, you could just do this. Change them to both sides become positive, so I could ignore the negative signs for now. And I have negative 5/6. The first number stays the same, times the reciprocal, which will be 9/10. And now we see if anything cancels. So let's see. Again, I have a lot of problems with 5 and 10. So that's how that cancels. And then we could divide the 9 and 6. 3 go into both of those numbers. So if I divide each by 3, I get this. And so when I'm left in the top, 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. Now keep in mind that if you wanted to do the reciprocal before you decided whether the answer is positive or negative, that's fine. You could write negative 5/6 times negative 9/10. Now, a lot of people write that as 9 over negative 10. It really doesn't matter where the negative sign is. You can put the negative sign out in front of the fraction or in front of the 9, but just so you only see one negative sign. So I usually just write the negative sign like that. That's still the reciprocal. Negative 10/9, the reciprocal is negative 9/10. So then when you multiply, you still are going to do a negative times a negative and get that positive 3/4 after you do the same canceling as seen above here. All right, so here's another one. We've got negative 1 1/2 divided by negative 1 1/3. So how do we do this problem? I need to write negative 1 1/2 as an improper fraction. So let's do that first. So there's a lot of things going on here. We've got mixed numbers, which we have to change to improper fractions. And then we also have a division. So we're going to have to multiply by the reciprocal. We also have negative and positive numbers to deal with. So there's a lot of concepts in this one little problem. So first, negative 1 1/2 written as a mixed number is negative 3/2, because remember the denominator stays the same. You do 2 times 1 plus 1. I still have a division sign. Don't change anything yet until you've changed each of these numbers to improper fractions. And then 1 1/3 is 4/3. So I have negative 3/2 divided by 4/3. Now you've got a division, so you want to rewrite that as multiplied by the reciprocal. So I still have negative 3/2 times, what's the reciprocal of 4/3? That'll be 3/4. So notice nothing cancels. All right, so we have a negative times a positive, so will our answer be positive or negative? It'll be negative. And if we multiply across the numerator, 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 times 4 is 8. So that's our answer. That's a perfectly good answer. Or you can write the negative and change this 9/8 to a mixed number by doing 9 divided by 8, so that would be 1 and 1/8. So both of those are correct answers. All right, here's our next problem, and notice we have both division and multiplication and negative numbers. So let's just decide if it's going to be positive or negative. I have a negative and another negative. So I have two negative signs. When you're dealing with just multiplication and division, you could decide whether it's positive or negative first, and you could just say, oh, two of them, you could make it both positive, and the whole answer is going to be positive. So now I just have to deal with this, the division and the multiplication. And remember, when you have multiplication and division only, you go from left to right. So you do not multiply first. So the first thing I do is the division. Now how do you do divide by 4? That's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 1/4. So I'm rewriting this division here, divided by 4, as times 1/4. And I also have times 5/6. So you could do it that way, or if you would prefer, you could leave your two minus signs here. That's really up to you if you want to leave off those minus signs at this point. Now let's see, does anything cancel? I have all multiplication now, so now I could just see if anything cancels. And I could cancel the 2 with the 4 or the 2 with the 6. So let's see, how about I do the 2 with the 4? And I have a 2 here. And this is why I advocate deciding whether the whole answer is positive or negative first, because a lot of times at this point there's so many stray signs all over the place, you might miss that you have a negative times a negative. But in any case, the answer, just like we decided at the beginning, is going to be positive because of those two negative signs. And in the numerator, we have 1 times 1 times 5. So we're left with a 5 in the numerator. And in the denominator, we have 3 times 2 times 6. 3 times 2 is 6, times another 6 is 36. This problem is similar to the last problem, except I put parentheses around the 4 times negative 5/6, which means in this problem I do the multiplication first. All right, so we want to do the multiplication in here first, so I'm going to write that as 4 over 1 times negative 5/6. And I'm going to simplify inside these parentheses. So I have a positive times a negative number, so my answer is going to be negative. And then I see if I can cancel anything. Well, I could do 2 goes into both 4 and 6, so I'm going to cancel. So in the numerator, 2 times 5 is 10. Now don't put negative 10 because I already put that minus sign out here. And the denominator, I have 1 times 3, which is 3. So now I have a negative divided by a negative. So you can leave that. But the division means multiplied by the reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of negative 10/3? It's negative 3/10. So is this final answer going to be positive or negative? Negative times a negative will be positive. I mean, you could have decided it at the beginning of the problem because you had two negative signs, right? So you could have decided that way at the beginning. So when I'm canceling, I don't worry about my negative signs. The positive and negatives are only there to tell me whether the final answer is going to be positive or negative. So let's cancel. Both these 3's cancel. Okay. And let's see, the 2 goes into 10 5 times. So if I divide each by 2, that's a 1 and that's a 5. And here's where you have to be careful. Some people will write the answer as 5, but it's really what? Well, the numerator has a 1 times a 1, so it's 1. If everything cancels in the numerator, because some people don't even put the 1's there when it cancels, and then they think, oh, there's nothing up there, but there is. There's a 1. So whether you write it or not, there's a 1 up there. And in the denominator, we have 1 times 5. So it made a big difference in our answer whether we had parentheses around the 4 times negative 5/6. The second way, we got 1/5 for the answer. And without the parentheses, we got 5/36 for the answer. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com where you can view all of my videos, which are organized by topic.